Hey there, everyone. Jim here with Fantasy for the Ages, the show where father and son get together and sometimes talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things together, and sometimes we talk by ourselves. It's kind of weird if you're talking to yourself, so thank you for being here. I'm not talking to myself today. Yeah, there's no son, but I'm talking to you. And I do want to highlight here, we've been bringing content out pretty regularly now, but there's going to be a little bit of a gap over the next week because I'm going on vacation down to see the boy. I'm going to be with Zach down in Texas for the next week. We're going to do a few things together. I don't know how quick we'll get those out on the channel, but regular content dropping, you can see a little bit of a lag over the next week. Of course, if you're finding this months later, don't worry. There's plenty still out there for you. I'm here for a quick take episode today. I'm going to talk about some fighting words. Okay, not quite, but if you looked at the title, these are some phrases, some words that if you walk into a group of fantasy fans and you drop these, get ready for a rumble. Quick way to get people arguing, giving their strongly worded thoughts, shouting across the room, and giving you looks of disdain or scoffing. Ha ha ha, sir, really? Or just blowing you off. But, we love to argue about the things we're passionate about. Fantasy fans are passionate. Fan is short for fanatic, after all. If you enjoy these quick words I'm going to drop here today, be sure to like the episode, subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and leave comments down below. Also below in the show notes, you can find the other ways to get in touch with Zach and I. We love hearing from people. So what do we have here? I've actually got 9 words and phrases that can be kind of inflammatory in the fantasy community. Let's start out with an easy one. Discworld. Yeah, Sir Terry Pratchett has written so many books in the Discworld universe, and people absolutely love them. And some people think they're just silly or can't get into them. So you walk in and you say, Discworld, it's really overrated. Whoo, people are coming at you. And then there'll be some in the background going, I feel you, brother. So that's one. Here's another one. Grimdark. Oh, some of us absolutely love the grimdark subgenre and what it's brought to fantasy fiction. And others, it's gross. It's disgusting. Why would we bring this crud into our beautiful fantasy fiction world? So it can be kind of contentious. Some of my favorite fantasy is grimdark, but some of it isn't. And I'll admit, grimdark is not for everyone. If someone comes and says, if you don't like grimdark, you're not a fantasy fan. Again, fighting words. In the area of grimdark, let's talk about one of the fathers of grimdark. Another word you can drop, a phrase you can drop and get people going is George R.R. Martin, the writer of A Game of Thrones and the whole series that's based on A Song of Ice and Fire, and then other related works like House of the Dragon. Okay, A Song of Ice and Fire has 5 books out. He's promised us 7, but he hasn't written the last 2 for years and years and years now, while he's gotten rich off of HBO and other related things. Some people still praise Martin's writing. Some really are ticked off at him. So make a comment about George R.R. Martin, you'll get people coming. Related to George R.R. Martin, try describing another great fantasy series, whether books or a show, and say, it's the next Game of Thrones. No one wants to be compared that way, especially a television series. They do not want to be compared to Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was a cultural phenomenon. It broke in and showed we can do gritty, dark fantasy fiction on the big screen, and it can work until it doesn't when you get to season 7 and 8. But that's another story, and that's another thing people can argue about. Yeah, don't compare things to Game of Thrones. They will not be happy with you, or they'll be really happy with you, or the Game of Thrones people will be unhappy with you. One of the shows that's gotten compared to the next Game of Thrones, is The Wheel of Time. Usually it's no Game of Thrones, that's for sure. The Wheel of Time by itself is one that will get fans going. Whether you're talking about the books or the TV series, the fans are rabidly passionate, and I'm amongst those fans. We love what we love. We will come at you if you're dissing the Wheel of Time. We will admit it's not perfect, but we don't care. My children aren't perfect. I still love them. And that's how we'll go around and around. And if you start going, the characters are weak, the writing's really not that great, people will be on you, proving you wrong. Another argument that will get people going, it's one of these explosive phrases, comes from things like the TV adaptation of The Wheel of Time, when people aren't happy with it. And a fan says, well, just deal with it. I mean, come on, it's an adaptation. At least you'll always have the books. As if you shouldn't be irritated and upset if the way they're adapting books you love doesn't work for you. Just, you'll still have the books. Makes it all right. No, that's going to make people ticked off. Like, you don't have a right to diss something, to disparage it, to argue against it, because, well, just go love the books you like. No, something needs to stand on its merits enough alone. So, yeah, fighting words again. I got 3 more. This one is a little more eclectic. Not everybody will get it, but if you say something like, that Sword of Truth series by Terry Goodkind, that is just the best thing ever. Fans in the know are going to come at you for that one. Once upon a time, that was me. I enjoyed that series. I've thought that through a little more, and I learned more about the author, and I've changed my mind. There are things you can still like about that series, but look into it a little more. Google, read for yourself before you're sitting there on a soapbox speaking the praises of that series. That's what I'm going to say, because if you do and you haven't looked, people again are going to see those fighting words. Woo! Brawl. All right, here's another one. Tolkien? Yeah, I've heard of him. He's kind of overrated. Ooh. J.R.R. Tolkien is not overrated. Bite your tongue. What he is one of the grandfathers of fantasy fiction. Not a father, grandfather now. So what he's got out there in The Hobbit, in The Lord of the Rings, in his writings that came together into the Silmarillion, they are not today's fantasy fiction. And if you judge them against what you can find today, you're not going to feel that they stand up, perhaps. But if you really look deeply at what you're reading, the world building is amazing. The complexity of the plot's incredible. He fell in love a little bit with poetry and song, but that was his style. Back then, it was wonderful. We just don't do that sort of thing in today's books. Do not diss Tolkien. Without his success, we don't have fantasy fiction the way we have it today. So, there you go. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Last one. This one's funny for me. Malazan or Malazan. Both ways. They're pronounced that way. I guess the author says Malazan, and I just can't get over it. So you can start arguing about how to pronounce it, but more importantly, whether it is incredible fantasy fiction or whether it is not worth the time, overblown, too hard to get into. People will argue about this one till they turn blue. The ones who think it's too hard, too difficult, don't waste your time, they're wrong, actually. But that's my opinion. And I'll be ready to come at the fantasy Brawl over this one. I'm having so much fun reading through Malazan. I'm only halfway through the core series, and I'm almost sad that I only have half left at this point. Thankfully, I'm reading a whole bunch of the other books that are related to it all, over 26 books. It's going to be a while that I can still enjoy the world that Steven Erikson gave birth to. So there you go. Fighting words to kick off your next fantasy fiction Brawl. If you're having a bunch of fantasy nerds very proud of themselves over for a barbecue, drop one of these and see what happens, and you'll have a good time. Or be chased off the premises. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.